Minister James Cleverly, welcome to SABC News. Thank you for your time.
Happy to be here.
There's been a great deal of talk this week around claims of a Russian pullback of some troops near Ukraine's border amid, of course, a flurry of high-level diplomatic activity. You told the Council a short time ago that the opposite was, in fact, true. Do you agree with the US assessment that an invasion is imminent?
Well, we look at the scale and the nature of the troops on Ukraine's border, and there is no credible explanation other than a force preparing for an invasion. Now, we don't know exactly when that might be, but it could be imminent, and all the signs indicate that it is. Now, we're still trying to dissuade Russia from taking aggressive actions, and we will continue doing that, and we will continue calling them to the diplomatic process. And we hope to avert an invasion, as Antony Blinken said, rather than watch one happen.
Russia's foreign minister a short time ago at the Security Council stakeout said it was, again, Western hysteria, and that these were essentially military drills within Russian territory. How do you respond to that?
Well, as I say, the scale, the nature of this military build-up, it is really difficult to explain away just through military exercises. Ukraine has called upon Russia formally to explain why those troops are there, and the response just is not adequate. If that is the case, what we're saying is we want to see those troops meaningfully disengage, move away from the border, and for Russia to properly get involved with the diplomatic process that's on offer.
Does Russia have legitimate security concerns about possible NATO expansion in Eastern Europe? Also, Ukraine possibly joining the alliance down the road. Quoting President Putin from just a few weeks ago, quote, "Let's imagine that Ukraine is a NATO member. It is fully packed with weapons. It gets advanced attack means like those in Poland and Romania, and it starts an operation in Crimea." You touched on Crimea in your remarks earlier today. He went on to describe the nature of Russian sovereign territory. What do you say to the positions that are being put forward by the Russian president?
Well, we should remind ourselves that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, and it's never expanded by force, it's never expanded by coercion. The Eastern European countries that have joined NATO have done so completely voluntarily. And what we are saying to Russia is that if they have security concerns, they should engage with us around those concerns. We also have concerns that we want to discuss with them. And there are fora, whether it's the NATO-Russia Council or the OSCE or even bilaterally. We are more than willing to listen to their concerns as long as they're willing to listen to ours. What we are looking to do is ensure there is not a conflict in Ukraine, and that will always be the priority for our actions.
What are some of your other concerns?
Well, I think that the best way of dealing with this is directly with the Russians rather than through a television channel. But we have always made it clear, the Foreign Secretary has made it clear, the Prime Minister's made it clear, as have other leaders internationally. We want to engage with Russia, we want dialogue, and we want to maintain peace.
Your Prime Minister Boris Johnson earlier this week said he saw signs of a diplomatic opening to avert conflict. We've of course seen reports around NATO offering negotiations around disarmament agreements and trust-building measures to allay Russian concerns. Is there a scenario where NATO offers security guarantees to Moscow in regard to its possible expansion east?
Well, as I said, countries choose to join NATO. They're not forced to join NATO. And countries have chosen to join NATO because they are fearful of their own security. One of the best ways of ensuring countries are no longer fearful of their security is moving the in excess of 130,000 troops that currently are seen at the Ukrainian border. We want to ensure there is peace in Europe. We want to ensure that territorial integrity and sovereignty of nation states is respected. It's Russia that has amassed this extraordinarily large military force at the Ukrainian border. It is in their gift to de-escalate, get back around the negotiating table.
But in short, Minister, the option then for Ukraine to join NATO very much still exists. The expansion, therefore, of a move eastwards, therefore, does exist based on the answer you just gave me.
Well, NATO has an open door policy. If countries want to join, there is a pathway to joining. And every country has the right, and it's incredibly important that every country has the right to choose which partners it has, to choose which alliances it joins, and it shouldn't be bullied out of doing that by having troops amassed on its border.
Western nations have talked about the imposition of a comprehensive package of economic costs on Russia were they to invade. There would be economic implications, particularly around global energy costs were that to happen. Oil and gas prices are already on the up. What are the implications of those sanctions, not just on Europe, not just on the United Kingdom, but the world at large?
Well, look, we don't want to have to respond to an invasion. This is the whole point of the work that we're doing, the declassification of intelligence, so people can see what's really happening on the ground. This is all about avoiding a conflict. And we've highlighted our willingness to impose sanctions if there was further Russian incursions into Ukraine as part of our deterrence, to deter aggression rather than our desire to respond to aggression. But Russia should understand that if they were to invade Ukraine, it would be a huge strategic mistake. There would, of course, be costs in human lives, which we desire to avoid, but there would also be economic costs, and they should consider that when they're planning what actions they take next.
The UN Security Council is responsible, of course, for the maintenance of international peace and security. It's held one meeting essentially on this buildup of troops. This was a meeting on the Minsk agreement, so we can argue that perhaps two meetings, but essentially this is a council that is hamstrung by the nature of its makeup. Permanent 5 members have a veto. If any action were put forward by the Security Council, it would have no effect because Russia would veto. Isn't this a case for why Security Council reform is so important?
Look, we fully support the United Nations. And of course, the structure of P5 membership does mean that countries have a veto. But nevertheless, it does mean that the international community can see the issues on which the United Nations is seeking to engage. The UN is an incredibly important vehicle for international diplomacy, and we absolutely respect that. And of course, we have said, whether it be through the UN or other international fora, we want to engage with Russia. I think at the moment, rather than discussing UN reform, we're very focused on maintaining peace in Europe, and that's what all our work is aiming towards.
It's like you're making a case for political theatre. I'm asking you, what are the results of a meeting that is hosted at the UN Security Council to deal with Russia's buildup? Essentially, a lot of speeches, but not much can actually be done.
Well, the fact that I'm here talking to you is a direct result of the existence and work of the United Nations. I'm highlighting the international community's willingness to engage with Russia. We're highlighting what we believe to be their disinformation tactics and potential false flag activities. This is happening as a direct result of the existence and work of the United Nations, and I think it's really important and meaningful.
Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister complained heavily in this meeting about a lack of implementation of the Minsk agreement, saying that the root of the problem was a systematic lack of desire from Kyiv to get into direct dialogue with representatives in those separatist regions of Luhansk and Donetsk. He accused Western nations of ostrich-like positions. What do you see, Minister, as the main prohibitive circumstances to the full implementation of Minsk?
Well, Russia has got to abide by the commitments that it has made. And it's no good them pointing the finger at others, saying, oh, it's their non-engagement, it's their non-compliance. Russia has signed up to responsibilities, and Russia should stand by the commitments that it has made. But these are distraction tactics. These are distraction tactics. There are in the region of 150,000 Russian troops on the north, east and southern borders of Ukraine. That is the reality on the ground. That's what we should be discussing. And being distracted by other things is completely wrong. Until that reality is removed, until those troops have left the border issue, that is the most important factor.
Can I ask you about two files on the Security Council agenda? You are, of course, penholder as the United Kingdom on Libya. Mm-hmm. What have you made of the election delay? We now have essentially two centres of power again, two prime ministers have been named. What's the trajectory here in terms of where you sit?
Well, it was disappointing and frustrating that the elections that were penciled in for the 24th of December did not happen. We want to see a Libyan-owned, Libyan-led process to get back to a proper functioning whole of Libya government. That will continue to be the UK's desired outcome. We will continue working with Libyans, whether they be from the east or from the west or wherever, to pursue that agenda. There is still definitely an opportunity for peace and ultimately prosperity in Libya, and that's what we want to support the Libyan people to achieve.
Let me correct myself. Ethiopia, of course, is not on the formal agenda of the Council, but its Parliament Minister this week voting to end a months-long state of emergency amid improving security conditions on the ground, but a conflict in which all the parties are responsible for atrocities, particularly against women and girls. What is the relationship between the need for peace and reconciliation and justice and accountability?
Well, the lifting of the state of emergency is something we very much welcome, but there's still a huge amount of work to do. We need to see that humanitarian access. We need to see a proper de-escalation and steps towards a meaningful and sustained ceasefire, and we need to see the release of detainees. These are important steps towards what we hope is a meaningful and lasting peace in Ethiopia, because, as you say, too many people, particularly women and children, have already suffered in this conflict.
James Cleverly, UK Minister of State for Europe and North America, thank you for coming to spend some time with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.